What's up, everybody? Welcome to Talking Ball, y'all. Here on this Tuesday night, as we look ahead to round two of the LHSAA football playoffs. I'm Cass Hargis. That is Jason Dewey, and joining us tonight because our guy Lance home under the weather a little bit, and we can't replace him with just one guy. It takes more than that. So we've got Mike McMillan of the Northshore Prep Report and Marshall Leffler of Red River Roundup here to join us tonight. Provide some insight for some big time games, guys. We appreciate y'all hopping on. This is going to be a fun show.
Yeah, look, I saw 14-0 put out some all-state teams, and Lance Lacoste right there, honorable mention, St. Mary's High School. So
there you go. Funny, they put that out and then he takes a night off.
Yeah,
just kidding. We're just kidding, Lance. We're just kidding.
He's celebrating, man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He deserves it. He should. He should go out and do it. But we'll jump into these round two matches. Before we do, looking back quickly at round one, which we covered on Sunday night if you were with us, but it seemed, and I don't want to get too deep into the numbers, but the margin of victory, I think there was like over 50% of the games were decided by more than 30 points. There were 15% of the games that were one score games, just a lot of big scores, a lot of blowouts. I don't know that that's not unforeseen. We maybe could have seen some of that coming, but at least on my end, it feels like with the top seeds getting back on the field, the playoffs start in earnest this week.
Yeah, I think we kind of knew that coming in, and that's kind of the nature of the split. You know, there's a lot of teams that are, no disrespect, but sub 500 teams that are in the playoffs. And you find yourself in outmatched situations sometimes, and we all know sometimes you have some of these lower seeds that play really tough schedules, and you know it does kind of play into it. A team that me and Marshall were talking about, you know, like Union Parish played a brutal beginning of their schedule, and that's kind of why you see their record where it is. But you know, I think this is where we finally get to see where the elite teams in the state play and some big round two matchups. We're really excited to watch it go down.
Yeah, look, I'll say this too about the split, and you know, some of those teams that play a postseason game with a losing record. You know, as someone who's coached before, if you can motivate your guys to finish the season like all the way through, to have no reason to even think about giving up, and to say, look, guys, we might get on the dance floor, and who knows? Like if you can tell a teenager that, they love that. So I do think that is some silver lining with some of this lopsided early round stuff, is that you get guys that are motivated to just give themselves a shot.
Yeah, it pales in comparison to 30 years ago when, you know, unless you won your district, you know, there were 8-2 teams and 7-3 teams that were really good that didn't make the playoffs and could have made some runs. But it did feel different Friday, you know, Saturday morning, kind of going over some of the games and looking at the graphics. You knew you were missing some teams in there. And then, you know, Sunday as I'm doing graphics for week two, it's like, oh, okay, there it is. Okay. Yep. And you see all those high seeds and those good records, you know?
Yeah. And like, we don't need to belabor the point of beating a dead horse. I think it is what it is. And I don't think anything's going to really change much. But when they changed it last year to a new definition of what select is, it made it so much better. And yes, there are some lopsided scores in the first round. Yes, but there's lopsided scores in every playoff first round. That's just kind of how it is. I also am a fan of the top seeds getting a bye. And I've said this before, if you don't play, you can't lose and nobody can get hurt. And that's a true reward for those top seeds. As we'll see some of these guys jumping into the playoffs tonight, we'll get right into it. Let's start into Division I non-select bracket. Big time matchup. Ouachita Parish, the 14 seed, travels down to Destrehan, the 3 seed. Last week, Ouachita defeated St. Amant 24-21. That's a really good St. Amant team that they played, by the way, with Cooper Babin at quarterback. These two teams played last year in the first round of the playoffs. Ouachita traveled to Destrehan and lost 30-12. Montreal Connor and that offense traveling down to Destrehan. Jackson Fields, Malachi Dabney, this is going to be a heck of a matchup. I lean that this may be a little bit high scoring, but that doesn't mean, like, these defenses are still good. Ouachita coming out of that 2-5-8 district, they're so battle tested. Really probably could have looked back and won 2 or 3 more games against some big time programs. So they're not going to be intimidated. It's probably a relief for them that they're not playing somebody named Rustin Neville or West Monroe, and they're going to see. As funny as that is to say, they're going to play Destrehan. But this is going to be a really good matchup for the 14 seed and a 3 seed.
Yeah, and when you look at Destrehan, we do consistently talk about Dabney, rightfully so. But again, I would argue probably three really elite receivers for that team too. One of the best, if not arguably the best, in Jabari Mack, LSU commit, and Kai Williams and Jalen Ash, have all played a part in that offense as well. Defensively, Bryce Bufkin and Ryan Montag, who's an All-State guy from a year removed, a really solid defensive piece, and MJ Dade for Washita Parish, rushed for 230 just a week ago, had a really big day running the football, and it probably does feel like a little bit of a reprieve in a sense, but you're still taking that long road trip. That's never easy. But Dylan Berryman, I think is really going to have to make a major impact in this game against a Destrehan team that's big, physical. They like to run the football, but also have those athletes on the outside that can really stretch the defense.
Yeah, look, and for Washita too, they had, that was a real just quality win for them against St. Amant in round one. That was one of those round one games that was, that was worth the price of admission. Mm-hmm. They had a really good drive there late where they were able to just kill the clock and kind of choke the Gators out, and they needed that. Their offense has often relied on Connor, making plays, getting out of the pocket, and he's totally capable of doing that. But that was a big time drive for them. I really like their coach, Benji Lewis. I mean, he's really popular around that area. And look, there's a lot of teams where he'd be there right now and be super successful. So he's the right man for that job. But I think that was, Ash went down to Destrehan this season, and front seven, like you mentioned, like kind of that Dylan Berryman role there, I think will be just as important on the road, in Destrehan. But I think that as many of those tough losses, quality losses that they had in the regular season, that was a darn good win against St. Amant in round one. And there were some key drives that they can look at and probably hang their hat on. Yeah,
for me, obviously I know Destrehan well, but it's kind of been a tale of two seasons, and it's really been since like week 3 or week 4 for Destrehan. After that Ash game, they had a couple games where they scored a lot of points, but you could see that young defense kind of coming into their own. And right now they're playing defense at a whole different level than they started the season. Jabari Max, he played a lot in that Catholic game. He actually returned that 100+ yard interception return for a touchdown in that game. But their ability to play defense right now is what's going to bring them to where they want to go. We talk about it in the playoffs now. The reality is everybody can score now. You look up and down these matchups, and everybody's putting up 30, 40, 50 points. I think the key for Destrehan is a little bit of how do you protect your defense? And I think their defense is good, but how do they protect them in terms of, you can throw it, you can put up points. When do you throttle back a little bit and feed Dabney, give your defense some rest, and still make long drives and end up with points, right? Jackson Fields and you touched on Jabari Mack. They can do so many things offensively. They're going to be hard to stop, but it's playoff time. Defenses are going to have to make stops. And look, I see Washita. I'll tell you quickly. In 1993, I think it was the third round of the playoffs. Actually, it was semifinals. We had beaten Shaw, and Washita came to Destrehan. And when they got off the bus, I had never seen teenagers that big in my entire life. We were fortunate to be a really, really good team that year and beat them and head to the Dome. But that was by far the largest humans I had ever seen.
Marshall, what are y'all feeding them kids out there? That's all Marshall.
Look, they're not little now either.
No. Well, Marshall, there's a guy, Jamie Spencer, who went to Notre Dame playing running back. He was every bit of an offensive tackle. He was a very talented, very large young man.
Yes, that is going to be a big physical. This game is going to be very similar for Washita to what they've played in their district. I think it's going to be very, very similar.
Yeah, it looks a lot alike.
Yes, no doubt about it. I know you mentioned scoring points, Mike. Speaking of that, the next game we're going to talk about, Hahnville, the 11 seed, travels to Parkway, the 6 seed. Hahnville last week defeated Slidell 52-39 in a game that they jumped up to a 24-0 lead. Slidell comes all the way back, gets it within, I think, 2 points, and it was kind of back and forth until Honville was able to score late to put it out of reach. Parkway hosted Covington last week and won 51-30. And a game that at least early on was a little bit closer than maybe the final score would indicate. I think this is a situation where when you Parkway, they're 9-0 rolling into week 10 against Evangel and they lose. I think it's a good thing Parkway played last week. I think had they had a bye 2 weeks to stir after a loss, I think it was good for them just to get back on the football field and get back to play. Not knowing anything about if there's any injuries or anything, obviously, but just from a momentum standpoint, getting back out there to go play. This is a team that can score with the best of anybody in the state. It's offensively, they're going to score. I don't think you're going to stop them. You just got to slow it down. Honville can score as well. They put up 52 last week. Their defense was able to make some stops late, so that's going to be the key. How does Honville handle the bus ride up there? This is a very fun second-round matchup.
A lot of offense for Parkway, no doubt. But really, I think you mentioned it, Cass. I think a big key is going to have to be that Honville defensive front, led by Frederick Downing, Southeastern guy, 6'4", 290, a really big
He's
physical
committed
player.
to Southeastern. He's really, really good.
And you also got Renan Russ, who's a really solid defensive end for that team. And guys, Landon Teague has been really phenomenal at the quarterback position. Began starting this year. Bennett Nakan, who was formerly the quarterback, moves out to receiver. He's done an excellent job. Fabian Celestine in the backfield. But really, when you look at the athletes on this Parkway offense, it's just jaw-dropping. Caleb Williams, quarterback, was hurt last season. Kind of really has come on strong this year. He's got so many playmakers to go to. Antonio Gladney has been a really big piece to that offense. Gary Burney, who's 6'4" wide receiver. He's a junior, by the way. Just goes up and makes plays. And I think you also got freshman A.J. Johnson, who's really been a key piece of that offense as well. Really a dynamic back. This Parkway offense has been very effective. Honville has to find a way to slow them down. And Coach Bourne really has kind of changed the progression of that program in just his second year. And I think this is a really big test for him to take his team on the road up north and take on a Parkway team that has felt unbeatable for a large portion of the season until those last 2 weeks.
Yeah, look, talking to a friend of mine that used to coach with Parkway, that's still close to the program, they're still angry about the loss to West Monroe in last season's postseason, and they've kind of carried that grudge with them this season. You mentioned, Cass, that game against Covington was tied early, and Mike and I did talk about that over the weekend. But one thing about Parkway in this district, all of the playoff teams that they played in 1-5A, which is a gauntlet, those were like one-possession games. The Airline was close. Shreve was close. Huntington was barely over one possession. They took the one loss to Evangel, and then they picked on Houghton and some of the other teams that just didn't get a lot of regular season wins. So Parkway, they win the district, or are they the top of the district, or are they really the best in that district? I don't think that we could definitively determine that throughout the regular season. Not saying they're good. They're not good. They dang sure are. But they probably still have a lot to prove as far as are they 9-1, or did they just get some one possession games? That kind of the opposite of Ouachita.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll touch on what Jason said. Coach Boyne coming over from Destran a couple years ago, he kind of changed that whole landscape over there. They look like some of those Destran teams, right? And Landon Teague, I can't say enough about him. He's thrown for over 2,200 yards. He's got 25 touchdowns on the season. He's thrown 2 interceptions, and that was against Destran. So, they haven't turned the ball over. And I think the playoffs, when you talk about 2 high-scoring teams, it sometimes doesn't come down to stops. It comes down to turnovers, right? Mm-hmm. And those turnovers play a huge part in it. Coach Boyd will have a good game plan. They can run the ball really well too. They've got some talent on the outside. To me, Cass and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. When you get out in these shootout games, what team wants to be in the shootout to keep scoring, and what team wants some defense to be played. And I think in this one, if you're Honville, you don't really want to get in a shootout. I think they can, but defensively, they're going to have to make some stops and get some turnovers because Parkway could just score it. And you saw what Slidell did a little bit last week against Honville.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And you mentioned the turnovers in all of these games, and as we get later into the playoffs, it becomes even more magnified. But especially with these two teams, when we're thinking it's going to be high scoring, special teams can play a huge role too, and not just in a kick return or punt return for a touchdown, but there may be a spot where Honville needs to steal a possession. Maybe it's an onside kick or a fake punt or something along those lines. Turnover in special teams will be huge. But I think Honville's going to want to make it a defensive game, and I think relatively speaking, defensive game in this case is probably somewhere in the 30s, high 30s. Parkway's going to want to put the game in the 50s. So who can kind of control the game and dictate the tempo of the game is going to be who probably comes out ahead.
Another look out for Mark Copenhaver of Parkway. He's a punt returner, safety, outside linebacker, kind of a tweener kind of guy. Look for him to come up with some big plays as well. He's kind of been that guy, this Parkway team, a lot this season. So I expect big things out of him. But before we move forward, again, make sure to follow, share, like, subscribe. Again, we appreciate everybody's support. Again, Northshore Prep Report and Red River Roundup. Again, follow those guys as well. Please follow the Facebook page. Follow the Facebook page. We're 50 people short so we can live stream. Again, I'm going to keep saying it until we get there. So please follow the Facebook page.
We got it. They heard you.
I hope.
The
numbers haven't shown it. I'm hoping eventually we'll
get
there.
Man, follow.
We got another matchup up in North Louisiana. Mandeville, the 18 seed, they were one of 15 lower seeded teams to win last week. They defeated Thibodaux 48-21 last week. They will travel up to Neville, face the 2 seed Neville. Neville comes into the game at 7-3. Mandeville 7-4. I don't know that Mandeville winning last week was a shock. I think the manner in which it was done was probably a little bit surprising. Maybe make you take a step back with the freshman Crew Calora. Threw for 5 touchdowns, ran for another. Jake Giacchetti and Luke DeMello, those 2 receivers from Mandeville, went absolutely bonkers on Thibodaux. I think they each had at least 2 touchdowns and both had over 150 yards receiving. The defense played well, maybe their best performance of the year. Neville had a bye last week, like we said. Their losses early on in the year, it almost feels like Neville had a season in 2 parts. Early in the year, they were a little bit banged up. Parker Robinson, their quarterback, was out for at least a half against Calvary, kind of in and out of the game. They really couldn't figure too much out on offense. Then they start getting Jamarian Robinson going. Their receiver, Zealand Young, he made one of the best catches I've ever seen. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was an unbelievable catch. But that offense is starting to play much better now. They're always going to play defense, and I think that's going to be the key to this one. Mike Collins made a career out of calling defenses and putting together defenses. That's what he does, and he does it. He did it at the college level. He's doing it here at Neville. Crew Calora and this Mandeville offense, they're going to see coverages and things that they may have never seen all year long, and it's going to be disguised, and they're going to be fundamentally sound. So can they handle that? Can they not turn the football over? And Crew has done a good job of that. As a freshman, he just hasn't turned it over. I think he's only got 3 interceptions. So then can they limit the turnovers? They're going to have to control the football and possess the football and just try to take this game into the 4th quarter. This Neville team is really good.
Yeah, I think they have one of the hottest 3-game stretches going into the playoffs. Earlier in the season, they had a tough win against Sterlington. They dropped a game to Ruston that felt like it was all but won. Again, I know Marshall probably has a better number on it, but I think it was like 21-3 at one point. Like it felt like it was a really wide margin, and it was a mountain for us.
18-point lead on STM in the 4th quarter.
Yeah. I mean, look, this Neville defense, so to your point, is really good. They know how to mix things up. And, up front, their front 7 is really physical. Then you got Juju Burns, UNC commit in that secondary, along with Jaden Reed, who's been their experienced guy, the ULL commit. And, everybody keeps talking Zaylon Young, and rightfully so. But, man, I really like what I see out of Imad Sledge, wide receiver who seems to be able to take the top off the defense. Their running backs and Jamarian Robertson and Jarvis Blackson are really good. I think this defense for Mandeville is going to have their work cut out for them. They're going to need Marquise Zenon and Dylan Henry to step up and make some plays and apply some pressure. Try to force this offense to be one-dimensional because they can attack you so many different ways on top of a defense that just finds ways to consistently give headaches to opposing offenses.
Yeah, similar to what Ash did, replacing JT Lindsay with Noble Williams and Kason Williams. Neville kind of seemingly replaced Nichols, who's at UNC now, with Roberson and Blackstone. Kind of replaced one feature back with two very capable running backs. Cass, you're correct. They were dealing with some nagging injuries at the beginning of the year, especially on their offensive line. Their offensive line is healthy now. Robinson's healthy now. And looking at that defense, so kind of to zoom in a little bit on their three losses. One of them was to Oak Grove in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lightning delay in that game. Very weird game, very long trip from Monroe to Hattiesburg. And it was just a weird game. So, just tough circumstances to travel that long and have the lightning delay and deal with all that far on the road. They lost to Ruston, but they were beating Ruston. Their defense was shutting down Ruston, some onside kicks, and we've discussed that game. They also stopped largely West Monroe's offense, except for Trez Davis, which, that's what he's going to do. Similar, kind of Ash did the same thing. But Neville had some really good showings on defense this year without district, and they held Ash to 14 points. Ash averages well over 40 points and haven't been held anywhere near under 20 points at all until 14 against Neville. So the Tigers are rolling right now, and it's not a surprise when you compare their roster at the beginning of the year. And I mean, perfectly coached.
This feels like the Neville team we thought we would get.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll touch on the defense a little bit more for Mandeville because I think this group as a whole has started to they moved a lot of guys around throughout the season, and some guys that started in certain positions haven't been there. But Zenon can rush the passer. He's done a really good job. Braxton Patio, who they moved kind of off the ball at linebacker, they've moved back on the ball, which I love that kid. He's going to be really good. He's a senior. I think the big key for the defense outside of, Dylan Henry's a playmaker, but there's a young man. He's a sophomore, Caden Martin, a linebacker. He's number 38. When you watch film, he doesn't look as big as everybody else. He's a sophomore, but he stands out. He covers a lot of ground. He makes a lot of plays. He's impressive to watch. I'm excited about that. On offense, Cass, I'm just going to say sophomore quarterback.
I know. We got to say he's not a freshman anymore.
It's week 12 here, right? So, daggone it, he's a sophomore. He should play well, right? Who cares? You've done it before. You're just heading up north to Neville, man. It's just another game. So that's.
I was going to say, man, I feel like Calora's freshman year, not since Luke Delafield have I just been amongst this much statewide recognition of a freshman QB playing this well. But Luke was the starter coming in camp. I think Mike Calora had to come in unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And so impressive. Lefty. I'm a lefty. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you guys are different in a good way. He's a supreme athlete. Yeah. When you figure out how to use the right hand, it'll work better for you. I promise. You just got to keep working at it. But I think on offense for Mandeville, it's still, I'm going to say it's a mystery to me how they're so good on offense because they really haven't been able to find that one guy to run the ball well. They've got some young kids that fill in, and Estep's a really good running back. Jaxo Quinn, who everybody kind of thought was going to take over that spot. He's been kind of an H-back tight end kind of guy for him, but he's also been huge for the Skippers on defense. And he's a player. He's a senior, and he looks like it. Their two receivers, Luke DeMello and Jake Giacchetti, Cass touched on these guys. They've made some really big yard after catch plays that I won't say surprise me. I've known Jake for a long time. He's tough as nails. A lot of people don't know. 3 weeks ago, he had a pretty bad thumb injury that, he fought through, and had another shoulder injury last week that he kept fighting through. But, you see that run he makes against Hahnville for the touchdown where he kind of breaks into the end zone. He's not going to go down easy. He's fun to watch. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the Mandeville group as a whole. When you lose a Nate Shepard, and I went through it, right? Losing a Rondell Mealy, and then you go, okay, well, who are you next year? Everybody doesn't survive that when you lose a superstar, because now everybody's got to play a role that previously it really didn't work that way, right? But they've gelled towards the end of the season. Cass talks about it all the time. Coach Jones, that coaching staff, they've done it before. They've been here before, and they do it well. So they'll have a good game plan. I echo what Cass says. You're not going to find much better defenses right now and defensive calls than going to look at Neville. So it'll be a fun one on Friday night for sure.
Absolutely. And one thing, I think I might have said it. I know I've said it before. That's a real home field advantage. Like that is Marshall, I'm going to brag for a second here, but we went up there a few years ago when I was coaching when Will Campbell was up at Neville, and we won there. And that was like the first time that they had lost a non-district game there in a very long time. The atmosphere is unbelievable. Like it is a true home field advantage. So not only is Mandeville going to play a really good team in Neville, they're going to have to deal with that atmosphere. And regardless of the result, this is going to be so valuable for Mandeville moving forward with all those young guys, because those receivers come back too. The receivers are both juniors, so they'll be back too. So definitely a fun one to watch up in
top-notch broadcast as well over there. Like I love. Yeah, we've been talking about streams and broadcasts again. I do want to go ahead and shout out. Look, comment Z Cheese says what a star-studded cast. Look, this is the guy who, again, when you're looking at those stream lists, this is the guy. And again, look, follow him as well. Louisiana HS Football on Facebook does an incredible job out there. So on top of all the guys here, again, give him a follow, a like as well.
Jeez. On the select side in Division I, 12-seeded Brother Martin is traveling to Butch Stoker Stadium to take on the 5-seed Alexandria Trojans. Brother Martin comes in at 7-4. Ash is 8-2. Last week, Brother Martin beat Liberty 17-16. Game ended with Liberty at the 8-yard line going in to score on a very controversial incomplete or complete pass, depending on which side you're on. Ash had a bye as the 5-seed. On the Ash side, I'll let Marshall get deeper into this, but Ash to me felt like they were in that district. They were maybe a very, very small tier ahead of everyone else, because I feel like they can do everything really well. They play really good defense. They score in bunches. They run the ball really well. They have a playmaker on the outside in Fontenot. They have a good quarterback. Like they can do all that. And then they run into Neville in week 10, and Neville kind of plays with maybe their best game of the year. On the Brother Martin side, man, Brother Martin winning 17-16 last week. They started off the season with 4 straight wins in which they scored 30-plus points. This offense, Hudson Fields at quarterback, but everyone knows it's Easton Royal at receiver, and there are other players out there, some playmakers. Coach Bonice is known for his offense, and they have struggled mightily offensively just to get anything going. They lost 4 straight games. Granted, it was 4 really good teams that they played. They squeaked by Warren Easton. They beat Holy Cross 31-3, and then they 17 points against Liberty. I think they only scored 3 in the second half. This is an offense that it's like we're waiting for them to come out and show us what we know they're capable of. They just haven't done it. Now would be a great time to do that. I just don't know if Ash's defense is going to allow that.
And look, Rowan Lipscomb and you also have Rex LeBlanc, receiver for them. They do try to get those guys the ball. And when you have a guy like Easton Royal who you can move around and kind of maneuver, it does kind of allow those guys some opportunity. But again, I know Marshall's chomping at the bit to talk about this defense, but man, this defense for Ash is just so dang good. I know Bryson Phoenix is a guy who I kind of heard about coming into the season. I knew, I believe he was injured last season or didn't get to play a lot. And then this year, there was a lot of noise coming into the season. And man, he's really stepped up to the challenge. Really that whole defensive line, Jaden Bayonne, Peyton Hobbs, those 3 guys have really been a dominant wrecking force. And that Ash offense, when they're rolling, I love watching this offense roll. They go to turbo, stick in the same personnel, same spot, and they just roll over people. And there's so many different ways that they can attack a defense. And I've seen Brother Martin play some solid defense. I got to watch them take on Holy Cross earlier this year, and they played shutdown defense. But again, to keep this Ash offense pinned down is going to be really difficult, along with Williams and Alex Fontenot at receiver. including Griffin as well. Like, they got dudes all over the field, man. This is a really good Ash team, and if somebody wants to say, man, they're the best team in the state, like, I could definitely hear that argument. I definitely have no problem listening out that argument.
Yeah, we talked to Coach Bachman this morning to kind of preview this game, and he talked about the bye week being super crucial to get everybody healthy. Everybody that's kind of nicked up, bruised. You talk about that defense. I really, really like watching Jaden Bayonne play. I think that he does so much down there, right in the trenches at the point of attack there, that allows, Xavier White and Bryson Phoenix to really make plays. Jackson Townsend as well, linebacker. Peyton Hobbs, you said as well, he has a dirty job down there right at nose, and he is super strong and just can do it all 4 quarters. So we talked about their running back by committee that they've used this year, Kaysen and Noble Williams. It's been important to kind of fill the shoes of JT Lindsay, but it's also been important because at certain times of the year, both of those guys have needed, some load management, we'll call it, just to, both sophomores, running backs, you're getting in a car wreck 20 times a game. So to have those guys be able to just balance each other out, it could not have worked better. And you mentioned their weapons that they have. They're getting another one back, KJ Ray, who only played against West Feliciana in week 1. He'll be back. And so that's another wrinkle at wide receiver. What it also does is it allows Griffin, number 5, to potentially – he's been kind of that Travis Hunter role this year. A lot of offense, a lot of defense, and a lot of stats on either side of the ball. He's got touchdowns via interception, via rush, and catch. But having Griffin potentially be able to take more snaps on defense if he needs, with KJ Ray back, in the slot on offense, that could be super beneficial for them. The home game will be super beneficial, and it'll be, from what I can see from Brother Martin. Obviously, Eastern Royal, there's enough that's been said about him, but they really do kind of start their offense around him. They move him around. He's not just in and out, on the wide side, just running 9 routes. He'll get in the backfield. He'll do whatever. And for all those receivers that you sometimes see on film go, gear a bit down a little bit when things aren't going their way, Easton Royal is not that way. They can be 28-0, and he's going to be high pointing every single ball he can get to. He's going to do it with a smile on his face. So tremendous opportunity for that defense, for a healthy Ash defense, to try to deal with Royal. But on both sides of the ball, that they've got the guys. I mean, 2-5A versus the Catholic League. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, no, and I think what's important for Brother Martin is, I think Alexandria is one of the best teams in the state, but they've played this type of talent, right? They know what the type of talent looks like. Now, I think Alexandria's a little bit different beast. I think they're coached really well, and Coach Bachman does a really good job with that group. I think for Brother Martin, it feels a little bit like Mandeville, in that they don't have that one guy that runs the ball, and they run the ball by committee a little bit, and they try to move Easton around, but virtually, Easton's done such a great job all season, scoring from everywhere on the field, that he doesn't get the ball in the air anymore on special teams, right? So, it's kind of eliminated there. And I don't know if I just go for it on 4th down. I don't care where I have the ball. I'm not punting it. If anything, I'm just going to punt it 10 yards down the field and take my chances on defense. But he's a dynamic playmaker. I think Coach Bonus is one of the best in the state. He's done it for a long time. His teams are always very well prepared. They play really well. So I would look for them to go in and be competitive. I think Ash just has too many athletes, and they do too many things really well for Brother Martin to come away with the win in this. Just how I feel. But, I could see Brother Martin giving them a fight, because I just think they're such a well-coached team, and they do have some talent. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, there's going to be there's whatever the game plan is, there's going to be something that they can exploit and take advantage of early. And the key is going to be, how much can they take advantage of it, and can they sustain it for 4 quarters? And they're also, that's a team, we talked about special teams earlier. They're going to be good on special teams. They're not going to be scared to surprise onside kick to try to take a possession or something. So they'll have a good plan. Let's see if they can go out there and execute it. But Ash is really, really good. And Ash would love nothing more to get back to the Superdome after last year.
Look, speaking of special teams, kicker and punter for Ash, Eli Fung. I think he's missed between field goals and extra points combined, missed 3 off of his foot this year. He's like over 96% off of his right foot. So
pretty good.
Talk about special teams and turnovers a lot. He's an asset.
Not a bad.
Marshall, you said they're really talented. They've got a lot of depth. They get more depth back. They're healthy because they had a week off. Their kicking game is very solid. So appreciate it. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
And I can ride my bike to the stadium. So
that helps, right? That helps.
That's a plus. Another one happening in your neck of the woods, Marshall. The 11 seed Rummel Raiders come in at 7-4. They will travel to Tioga, the 6 seed Tioga Indians. Last week, Rummel defeated Holy Cross 24 to nothing. Tioga was on a bye. This is one when the brackets came out early. As soon as they came out, we kind of circled, almost feeling like Rummel could go in there and kind of take advantage of what might be perceived as a good draw. That's not a slight to Tioga, but this Rummel team is, again, they lose on an extra point to LCA early in the year. In week 10 against Carr, they were winning 14-0. And it wasn't a fluky 14-0. They were getting after the quarterback with their front four. They're really good in the secondary. They seem to have found something offensively the last probably 3 to 4 weeks with Jaden Terrence and Corian Hawkins just essentially going to a wildcat offense. And like their bread and butter is running the football. So they're here it is. Y'all try to stop it. They also been able to get to the football to those guys through the air a little bit, out of the backfield. So they're playing really well. The defense at Rummel, whether it's under Coach Monica or previously under Coach Roth, their defense is always going to be good. It's always going to travel. They're going to be physical. This is Tioga is going to have their hands full, but I also think that Tioga is going to have a slight advantage. They had a week off. They get the game at home. Rummel's got to make the trip up to Central Louisiana. This is also a Tioga team that did not make the playoffs last year. So they're going to be extremely excited about Friday night. Rummel's got the experience on them. This is one that's very interesting, I would say.
Yeah, and, I think they're going to be rocking at the reservation, right? Like, this offense has been really explosive. I got to watch in full their game against Gina and was really blown away by the explosiveness of their offense. Kervin Johnson, now LSU commit. Sorry, Marshall, former Louisiana Tech commit. What can you say, man? People like to be Tigers. Sorry, guys. But look, man, he's been an incredible playmaker for this offense. Case Malone does a great job getting him the football. Pontier in the backfield does a great job. But this Rummel defense, I would argue, is top 5 in the state. They're a really impressive unit. They fly to the football. They've done so all season. It just kind of it's so easy to get lost in the shuffle of the Catholic League, very similar to 2-5A when talking about that Neville defense. Mitchell Harris has really done a great job at defensive back. Jacoby Dunn on that defensive line has just been phenomenal for them. They just fly to the football. Carlin Kinchin's a big playmaker at linebacker. Like, they do a really excellent job keeping teams in front, flying to the football. They held Carr in check for a decent portion of that game, and that's not easy to do. We know teams have given up a lot more in one quarter than they've given up in one game. So I think this is going to be an interesting one. It's going to really depend on how Rummel handles that road trip and, again, how raucous that environment is at Tioga. I think they're really going to be jacked up, especially like Kaz hit on after missing the playoffs a year ago.
I think it's kind of weird to think of a team as backing into the 6th seed in Division I Select as a 4A school with less than 1,000 students, but that's what happened to Tioga. Defensively, they, Franklin Parish had their way in week 10 at home. That was up in Winsboro. So if that's your week 10, then you got to bye. Then you have Rummel coming in. It'll be very key for them to this week try to fine tune what went wrong in week 10. They got a lot better over the offseason. Coach Dan Chrisman, it was previously an assistant, but he was part of the offseason program. He kind of ran it. And all the players, if you talk to them, that's what they attribute this year's success to is the summer. Like that's the first thing the quarterback says. That's the first thing everybody on the team says was the summer. I think they had their hands full against Rummel. I think that Franklin Parish was a big opportunity for them to try to make some sort of statement there. And if Franklin Parish was able to do that, then I think that Rummel is probably going to feel pretty confident about, headed to the reservation. But Tioga's offense will be fine. They got a 4-year starter at center, Tucker Landry. And they really have seniors at a lot of different positions on both sides of the ball. But their defense they're going to have to play their best defensive game of the year against the Rummel Raiders.
Yeah, and I think when I think of Rummel, I think it's one of these under the radar 7-4 teams that you go, holy crap. When you really go look at them and what they've done, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, they have a 1-point loss to LCA, another 1-point loss to John Curtis. They have a game that gets away from them against St. Aug. They only scored 3 points that game. But I think they played Curtis better than anybody, Carr better than anyone else has all year. And that includes the Curtis game. I just think that Rummel, defensively, what they did to Carr was impressive. It's an 11 seed. The more you dig into it, if it was a power ranking thing where you seeded them, Rummel's probably a top 18. Just watching those guys play and what they do. And they've done it without, I'll say without real star power. Sometimes Rummel has these, crazy Division I kids in 1 or 2 or 3 of those. And they don't have that, but they play really well. Cass touched on it. They always play good defense. We talk about it all the time. A running game and defense travels, right? Especially in November. And, they've got 2 of the better ones. And I love what they're doing on offense now, kind of, getting those running backs in the Wildcat formation and having an extra blocker. I think that's changed the game for them.
They had to find themselves offensively this year, too. They lost Norman Taylor, who was really their bell cow back last year. I know Hawkins kind of stepped in and filled the void a bit there, but Jaden Terrence has done phenomenal. But that offensive line for Rummel is a severely underrated unit. Raymond Hughes, massive offensive lineman. I think he's like 6'6", 300, getting those SEC looks. I mean, this is a really big, physical, nasty offensive Rummel line.
Jason, when you look at Rummel, when you look at their offensive line, just look waist down. They're big. They're big. I don't care how tall you are. Yeah. You want to play high school football on the offensive line. Just when you've got that lower trunk that can translate, and they've got them. They got a bunch of them.
Yeah, they do, and that was something coming into the year offensively that they were going to lean on, which I think as a Rummel team, you could say every year we're going to lean on offensive line, but that was kind of that was what they were doing. They've also got experience doing it, so yeah, Tioga has their hands full, but I think it is neat to see this game happening, and with Rummel traveling up there, it is going to be a big night in Tioga, but it is really cool to see it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, we'll go down to Division II non-select. And if you take away the seeds in this game and just close your eyes and said these 2 teams are playing, you would say it's the first week of December. But we have the 13 seed Cecilia Bulldogs coming in at 6-4. They will travel to the 4 seed Lakeshore Titans. Cecilia last week defeated Carroll 56-7. Lakeshore was on a bye. This is a Cecilia team that comes in on a 5-game winning streak. They're defending Division II non-select. That's a lot of words. State champion. They made a run last year as the 18 seed all the way to the Dome. They played every game on the road. They're going to have to do the same thing this year. I know there's a different coach. Coach Gaines leaving to go to East Essentially. We got a new coach, relatively new team. They lost a lot of guys off of last year's state championship team. You've got to believe the belief is still there that this is what they do. We get a double-digit seed, we go on the road, and we play for 5 weeks and end up in the Superdome. Not the best draw if you're the 4-seeded Lakeshore Titans, but if anyone can handle it, it's them. They come in. Brody Loudermilk at quarterback does it all in that offense. For Coach Indes, this is a program that it hit a high note. I think it was in 17 or 18 when they made it to the Superdome as a relatively new school and program. Coach Indes has been there. Was this the second year, Mike? Year 2?
Third now.
Third year. In year 3, he's got them. all he does is win everywhere he goes, and he's doing the same thing at Lakeshore. They're going to run the football. They're going to run it right at you. They're going to be physical. Cecilia can play that game too. Cecilia can do that too. So this is going to be a very good matchup in round 2. Before we break it down, I will say I think also part of this new select definition with the buys in the first round, it's made round 2 matchups unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. And this is another product of it.
Well, and look, I'll say this before Jason goes. Hey, Cecilia, you can dress up like whatever you want to for playoff time. We know you're not a 6-4 team.
Right.
Nobody's buying it anymore. Nobody's looking at your seed. It's just everybody knows you got Cecilia and you got some athletes coming to town.
That's right.
There's no oh shucks, man. We're just so happy to be here.
No.
There's none of that with Cecilia, man. Look, the Bulldogs have been for real. Early in the season, they definitely had their struggles offensively. We're kind of trying to figure things out, although I think Colin Dorr at quarterback has really stepped in and done a good job. And look, man, it helps when you got a guy like Braylon Kelly at wide receiver. Kid's unbelievable, a huge playmaker, and Malik Joseph as well. And you also got Frankie Frank, man, on the defensive side, really is a big-time playmaker for them. Lakeshore plays that physical brand of football, though. They're going to run the football right at you. They're going to play physical. The question is, how will Cecilia respond to that? We know that they've been playing a lot of teams above their weight, right? They played Central earlier in the year. Last year, they even played in a last-minute game. They scrambled and got a game with St. Aug. Like, they're not afraid of anybody, and rightfully so. They feel confident in what they're able to do, and they're once again trying to make their presence felt in the playoffs and make a deep run with one of these. Not as low of a seed as last year, but again, as a 13 seed, a double-digit seed, people are aware of them. Like you said, Mike, like they're not going to sneak up on anybody. And I think this Lakeshore team will be prepared. But again, they better be ready because this Cecilia team went into the dog yard a year ago and won a big playoff game against Lusher. So this Cecilia team were road dogs last year, no pun intended. And again, they're looking to do the same thing this year.
Yeah, talking to Coach Cody from Cecilia, and Mike, I would like to get your thoughts on this. But Colin Dorey, Jason, you mentioned him. He's that similar kind of running quarterback, kind of your weight room monster, who is, and he's not. I don't think he's as big as Brody Loudermilk, but he's very comfortable, just taking the ball and running power with it. And you also mentioned like Malik Joseph. I think Cecilia had like maybe 2 Division I receivers last year that graduated. So they've backfilled that with Joseph and Jaden Lewis and some other guys. And then they've got, for a 4A school, I think they're 4A, they have a lot of guys that played last year as like sophomores and kind of underclassmen. Yep. Colton Falk, one of their linebackers, is a 3-year starter, which, isn't always the case at middle linebacker, outside linebacker at a school like that in that district. So, but I'm intrigued to kind of see this QB power on QB power matchup. I don't know if you agree with that, Mike.
No, I do. And Coach Indest will admit that his quarterback is their best running back. Like he said it, openly before. Brody was a running back that got converted. But I'll say this, he's done a very good job in the passing game when he needs to throw it. Now, a lot of that's predicated on the run and what they do offensively and getting defenses to give them certain looks to be able to throw the ball. They've lost their top 2 receivers, but I don't know how Coach Indest does it. I think he's one of the best coaches around. When you say plug and play, next man up, it doesn't matter who it is. They're going to come in, they're going to perform well, and they're going to play their role well. I think the interesting thing for me with Lakeshore, and it's a little bit different than some of these other higher seeded teams, they've got a lot of kids that go both ways, particularly in the offensive backfield and on defense. So, Cade Stevens, Audrey Gross, Dylan Kusaks, a lot of those kids play defense too. So they share the load a lot. I think that's why you see Brody get a lot more carries, is because he's probably the freshest of the group. But I remember covering him early in the year, and I think we had them in week 3, maybe week 4, and I remember covering him and thinking, okay, I'm not really sure if he's that athletic, and I'm not really sure if he's that fast or whatever. But we see him in week 4, and my first thought was, my gosh, like he's way bigger than I thought. And I said, well, he's probably not as fast as I thought. Well, he proved that wrong. And I said, okay, we'll pound him a little bit. And when I tell you, and I texted Coach Indes the following morning, and I said, I feel like you ran quarterback power 237 times in the second half. And Brody was just a man amongst boys. And I give him credit. But I think what they do with the wing T offense and how they scheme things, offensively, technique-wise on the offensive line, they're so good, which you have to be if you're going to run the wing T. But, they get yards. Yeah, I think I said this on one of our shows at one point, but if it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, just give them the first down. Like, they're going to run belly, they're going to run power, and they're going to get 2 yards. Just move on, let it go. But I think it's a great matchup. I'm glad we will have Roger Glenn there as our game of the week for North Shore Prep. So we'll have a story and follow him on Twitter for that. But fascinating matchup. Nobody on the North Shore area between Franklinton and Lakeshore wants to hear the word Cecilia. So hopefully we can get out of this one with a win and move on.
Yeah, you said Coach said Brody Loudermilk is their best running back, which I agree with. He also is probably their best linebacker if he wanted to be too. He's like just a wrecking ram running through there. So yeah, very, very interesting matchup over there at Lakeshore. Another high profile or high octane matchup up in Franklin Parish. The Letcher Bulldogs, the 10 seed Letcher Bulldogs, travel to Franklin Parish, the 7 seed Letcher. 7-4. They defeated Iota last week, 49-7. Franklin Parish 9-2. They played last week against Abbeville and won 62-12. Jason and I actually had the pleasure of calling the Letcher Iota game last week on VSN. I could not have been more impressed with that whole operation. And look, that's saying something because that's what a Coach Jenkins coach team is going to do. They're going to be well coached. They're going to do things on offense that exploit weaknesses. They're going to change some things up. They're going to give you different looks. They did all of that and then some. They have a freshman quarterback in Timmy Charles, who I talked to Coach before the game, and he was kind of talking about the growing pains and like kind of giving him gray hair, getting through the season with a quarterback. He looked like a 5th-year senior. I mean, it was super impressive the way he handled the football and ran that offense. They have a guy. He plays receiver. He plays slot. He plays running back. They might have even lined him up at quarterback. And Ashton Starks, he's a return guy. He's a cornerback. Extremely explosive. Jamilin Joseph at back in the backfield at running back as well. And then on the defensive side, Caden Parquette, the defensive tackle, one of the best football players, regardless of position in the state of Louisiana. He defensive tackle. He ran down on kickoff and made 2 or 3 plays. He lined up in the backfield and got a carry. Super athletic. This Letcher team. Marshall, you can give us more on Franklin. I know Franklin is extremely talented, and that's probably an understatement. But this Letcher team, just what they looked like last week and what they've looked like the last couple of weeks, kind of seems to all be coming together for them.
Yeah, look, this Letcher team, I got to watch them play St. Charles earlier in the year when they were going through some growing pains. It was a completely different football team. This team really has found themselves offensively as well with youthful receivers, a very experienced offensive line, defensive front 7, somewhat experienced secondary as well. And Ashton Stark plays second in the secondary as well. Coy Ruiz at linebacker for this Letcher defense does a fantastic job running the football. Johnny Jones at receiver, along with Leandre Booth, really big, 6'4", both of them 6'4", 6'2" range. Really big playmakers that go up and are great compliments to Ashton Stark. But when we talked to Coach, we did have Coach Jenkins on the other day, and I asked him point blank, what do you think about this Franklin Parish team? How much have you gotten to think about them? He said, look, man, when we walked off the field, we went into the clubhouse and we started taking a look at that film. And I'll say this Franklin Parish team, I would argue pound for pound, top 5 team in the state purely based off of talent. I mean, the amount of talent oozing from this football team is unreal. You had Zarian Ellis at quarterback, who's going to translate to defensive back. The first LSU commit from Franklin Parish ever. Malik Credit, Trey Martin, who's a guy who's a junior, but really getting that Division I attention. And, oh, by the way, the leading rusher on the team is DJ Neal, who's a sophomore, over 1,000 yards. Not to mention Tavion Bell, Texas State commit up front, 6'3", 255. And then Chris Addison, who was hurt a little bit in the beginning of the year, but a Michigan State commit, 6'3", 235. really physical football team up front defensively. I think that's going to be an interesting matchup that kind of goes under the radar. Lutcher has that experienced offensive line, and to see this offensive line of Lutcher take on the physicality of Bell and Addison on this Patriots defensive front, I think it's going to be a fun matchup.
So you mentioned the first LSU commit from Franklin Parish. It used to be Winsboro High School before they consolidated. Can anyone name LSU an NFL player that went to Winsboro High School? Mr. Anthony McFarland, your boy Booger, is from Winsboro, Louisiana, played for the Winsboro Cubs back in the day, and of course, did his thing in NFL, and now is one of the faces of ESPN. But that kind of lends to this point about Franklin Parish, is that in this area, West Carroll, which is Oak Grove, Caldwell Parish, Franklin Parish, Union, however many years ago, 10, 20, 15 years ago, a lot of these rural areas consolidated their schools. And so there's one football playing school in the parish. For the most part, Grant is that way. They got another 1A school. But really in that kind of north to northeast area, it's super rural. So everybody in Franklin Parish, there's one high school, and it's that one. All the other ones closed down. That lends itself, similar to Union, similar to Caldwell, similar to some other you kind of get feast and famine as far as your talent goes. Obviously they're in a feast phase right now. A huge reason for this is head coach Adrian Burnett. He played at Bastrop back when Bastrop was running over everyone in the mid 2000s. He went parlayed that into a career at Tulane. And actually spent some time at Bastrop early on in his coaching career. His dad, Jesse Burnett, has I think 3 or 4 state championships in basketball. He's passed away, but back in the day, he was a legendary basketball coach in that area of the state. Burnett took over a Franklin Parish team that had no business being the type of seed that they are right now, and he flipped them. He has elevated that program. And just injected life into it, and now mix that with this, this high tide of talent that they have. And the Patriots, Matt, have made so many statement wins this past season. I'm a huge fan, I have huge respect for football in St. James Parish. I think Dwayne Jenkins was at St. James before he came to Letcher, but between those two teams, I have so much respect for how they play the game. And Mike and I spoke earlier. It's like, this is where you wish you could be in 10 places at once this Friday. Letcher and Franklin Parish. I can't wait to see how hard these teams hit each other.
Yeah, look, I think they bring kind of the same mentality, both of them. You think of Franklin Parish and the River Parishes. I think you get to a lot of the same type of kids, right, which is important. When I think of Letcher, I really think of Letcher a little bit like I think of Rummel, except maybe a tale of two seasons. But early on, they lose in week 1 to Slidell, which at the time it felt like maybe it was a bad loss. And then you realize how good Slidell ended up being. But, the other 3 losses are E.D. White, Vanderbilt Catholic, and St. Charles Catholic. And that, to me, is the gauntlet of that sector, right? So, I've always been enamored with Letcher. I was sitting with Eric Ritchie at VSN this weekend and at volleyball state championships, and he was talking about a Letcher coach, and all I could say was, isn't that just an amazing place? Like, their quarterback club is the best around. They do everything right on Friday nights. That whole place shuts down, but it's a really neat area. I've got some family there, and my wife does. So we make it back a lot, as much as we can. But it's a neat place. Super talented. I'm really excited to see their freshman quarterback continue to do what he does. And there's some quarterbacks in Letcher's history that people don't know the names because they didn't go big Division I and stuff, but they've had a slew of state championship quarterbacks that have done a really good job at the high school level.
No doubt. And that's I think we might have asked Coach Jenkins about that or mentioned it. The town of Letcher is going to be in Franklin Parish. That's going to be such a fun atmosphere. That's good. That's similar to the Cecilia Lakeshore game. Like, if you close your eyes and you think this game was in December, that's the level that's at. So fun stuff going on there. Division III non-select. We'll go to now another one with an extremely talented team. They're a lower seed. They're going to be traveling, but it's number 12 seed Union Parish, 6-5. They travel to Erath Undefeated ERAF, the 5 seed. Last week, Union Parish defeated Rayville 41-18. ERAF defeated Bogalusa 56-7. This is an ERAF team that you may not know a whole lot about or even have really heard about. But they've just quietly beat the brakes off of everybody. Their smallest margin of victory has been 10 points. Everything else has been 20 plus. I don't know, to be completely frank, I don't know if that says a whole lot about them or about their competition. I don't know. I know there's some teams on there that they're just weren't very good, but good teams do that to teams that aren't very good. Like they do what they're supposed to do. This is a different beast that they're going to see on Friday night, though, in Union Parish. This is another team, maybe I say underseeded. The power rankings are what they are, but at a 12 seed, they're not your typical what you would think of as a 12 seed. The schedule they played the first 3 weeks of the season, and they lost all these games by a pretty substantial margin, but you played North DeSoto, Alexandria, and Airline in back-to-back to-back weeks. That is an absolute gauntlet. So they've seen what it looks like. They've also they played Calvary and it gets shut out 48-0. Sterlington beats them pretty bad in week 9. In week 10. Big win last week in Rayville. They're very talented. They've got the tight end Ari Slocum going to Arkansas. Like I don't know if you've ever seen any of that this year, but this is something they talk about the NCAA basketball tournament 12-5. This may be one that you pick a 12-5.
When you look at this ERAF team, it kind of starts and ends with quarterback Jack Landry, 6'4", 190, all district, all state, all world, offensive MVP for the district, really an incredible arm talent, threw for 1,600 yards a year ago. And I think the problem is, can you keep him upright? Because, the physicality of this Union Parish team, it always seems to be consistent. And Slocum also plays some defensive line, if I'm not mistaken, Marshall, right? I know he's a really big physical player, and this offensive line is going to have their work cut out for him. Look, when I was at St. Charles Catholic, we just always – it was Farmerville at the time, but we played Farmerville a few times. We played Union Parish a few times after I left. But anytime they'd come to town, Coach Monica would say, they're big, they're strong, and they're here to hit you in the mouth. And that always seems to be the case. They like to run the ball right at you. I know their guy is Jevian Henderson, who's been a big playmaker for them. This is a really interesting one because you can't look at the records. You got to look at the matchup on the field. And this feels like this could be a big opportunity for Union Parish to go on the road. But ERAF kind of feels like they've been a little bit underestimated behind Landry, who's been a career quarterback for this program. So I think this would be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, so you said look at the don't look at the records, look at the matchups. The matchups were tough for the Farmers this year. They played North DeSoto, they played Ash. They were, that did not go well. Neither on the scoreboard or between the lines. Picked up a little bit of momentum against Airline, and then Calvary. That was a shutout from the first. I think the opening kickoff was fumbled touchdown and it was over. Sterlington, that was a shutout until the backups were in. They scored one touchdown against the backups. Javion Henderson, he's extremely. I mean, he's the heart and soul of their team this year. A senior, both at running back and at linebacker, which they did last year with Tyquarius Wilson. So the thing about Union this year is they made a run to St. James in the semis, and again, I was there. One weird fumble. Late fumble, picked up late, returned for a touchdown. No replay, whatever. But Union was driving, had the ball and was driving, and who knows what happens to that game. Played really well against St. James. Also beat Sterlington in week 10 last year. They don't have a win this year that they can point to and say, look, see what we did on October what or November whatever else. They don't have that this year. The teams that they beat, they should have beaten, and they did. The teams that maybe had a matchup advantage beat them. We mentioned the first three, but also Calvary and Sterlington. So it's kind of like Toga. It will have to be their best game of the year for them to win. ERAF, I kind of find it interesting, and Skipper and Mike, I'd like to kind of hear the baseball aspect of kind of like Sterlington and Oak Grove and North DeSoto, to where like the football teams are strong and the baseball teams are strong as well. And Erath was super strong on the diamond last year. So I'm curious how some of those athletes translate to the gridiron, and if it's one of those situations where it's one of those schools that are strong in football and baseball with a lot of the same guys.
And they do. Jack Landry plays baseball. He's a good baseball player.
I assumed he did. Yeah.
And I think more than that, before Mike, you can go ahead, but more than that, what we're talking about, transferring, crossover between sports, the fact that they won and they know how to win, and that's huge. That's huge. Erath was also 9-1 last year. Got a bye last year, lost in the first round. So can they kind of get over that hump?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They've done this for a little while now. I've got a really good friend of mine. His son plays on that Erath team, so I've followed them a little bit. One thing that I try to do, when you don't know who these guys are playing, right, is try to see who they've played and who those teams have played. And I'll say this, it's pretty impressive, but Kaplan goes to Pine last week and kind of puts it on Pine a little bit, 33-18. It's a very good Pine football team. Erath beat Kaplan 2 weeks ago, 56-0.
Yeah.
So if you kind of want to know a measuring stick for them, they're talented. This is kind of the second year for them being this successful, and it's a lot of the same kids. So I think as a coach, you hate those playoff losses because you lose a group of kids, but you're excited about, hey, you lost in round one last year. Now you've got a lot of those same kids coming back going, that's not going to happen again. We'll be a different team. And their winning culture helps a lot. So I'm excited about this one. I think it'll be a great matchup because I think Union Parish is very talented.
No doubt. And, one of the neat things, too, and it seems like we've said this about quite a few teams tonight, but that town of Erath really gets behind that school. Like it's a community deal. It's a community effort. So they're going to be excited for Friday night and see if they can't get that monkey off their back and move on against a very talented Union Parish team. We'll go over to Division III Select, which may be, if it's not the deepest, the most competitive bracket maybe out there, just when you look at the programs. And I think this first game may illustrate just that. 12 seed at Northlake Christian comes in at 7-3. They will travel to Dunham, the 5 seed, who was 9-1 last week. Efficient would be the word, Mike, I guess we could use. 22 plays, 59 points for Northlake, something that's insane. But they beat St. Louis Catholic 59-20. They now travel to Baton Rouge to take on a Dunham Tiger team who was in the Superdome last year and returned junior quarterback Elijah Haven, one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the state, but in the country. This is a Northlake Christian team that I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, Mike, but they're big, they're physical. They run the football. Cameron Casnave at running back. Jordan Willis, as impressive as he is with the ball in his hands on offense, coming downhill at safety, it's almost scary. It's fun to watch him do that. Charlie Gilmore, big-time playmaker for them. If they can put it together, I think the ceiling is very high for this team. They're going to have to slow down an impressive Dunham offense. Receivers Jarvis Washington, Trevor Heyman. The Dunham team has been there. They've done that. Coach Weiner does a tremendous job with that program. They're always in it. That you give them one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and this is what they do. So coming off the bye, Northlake Christian traveling to them. You can see if Northlake Christian kind of dictate the tempo to the game to them. I think that's their path to victory. We'll see if they can do that.
Kasnov doesn't want a season to end. Cameron Kasnov just went over 5,000 career rushing yards this past week. I mean, what an incredible career he's had. And this is a big opportunity for him to go up against a really impressive Dunham football team. They're only lost to St. Charles Catholic, who, look, I would say is a similar style to what Northlake Christian wants to do. They want to come in, run the football behind that big offensive line. You don't always get to call the big boys' names, but, Layden Luparella, 6'5", 280, and Wyatt Parrott, 6'2", 280. Some big guys up front for that offensive line. They provide some good holes, and that's why you're able to get Kasneva that many yards. But the truth is, when you look back at Dunham's loss, St. Charles wasn't really moving the football a ton. They had 2 pick sixes in that football game. So this is a defense that, as much as we tout about this Dunham offense and how impressive they've been, defensively, they've been pretty dang phenomenal. So this is a Dunham team, and in the world of, and rightfully so, I'd say LCA territory, right? It feels like they're kind of the overbearing force. And Dunham kind of feels like, look, this is another opportunity to prove that we are a worthy competitor. And this is a North Lake Christian team that, again, is big, physical. The only team that Dunham has lost to, kind of a similar style. I think this could be a really interesting matchup in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I certainly want to hear Mike, talk about the Wolverines here. I did talk to one coach this week, whose opinion I would certainly trust, who unequivocally, didn't even want to hear anything to the opposite. In his opinion, Elijah Haven's best QB in the state right now, and that's with Houston, Ziegler, Restovich, Delafield, take your pick. So that's certainly high praise. And Dunham has been dominating. They've got some just absolutely dominant wins this season. I coached at North Lake for several years. It's probably my favorite place I ever was. And St. Thomas Aquinas and Pope John Paul in district was kind of your motivating opponents. But all year long, no matter what, it was LCA and Dunham. That was who was in your sights as, if you want to be, that's the standard. If you want to be as good as we think we want to be this year, we're going to have to beat Dunham and Lafayette Christian. I assume that's kind of a similar attitude on Wolverine Drive, but I love Coach Willis. He's been there for a long time. And North Lake Christian getting to go to Baton Rouge, go on that campus and play Dunham. I've done it several times, and we relish the opportunity to go on that campus and try to match up with them. And Mike, you can tell me whether or not it's kind of still like that.
No, it is. And I think in my mind as a coach, and I think the kids feel the same way, is you want to go play the best, right? Yeah. I think if you're a competitor, you want it, right? And we had looked at the map.
I think we might have lost Mike for a second.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and overall, we're talking about LCA and Dunham, but
you guys all hit the nail on the head. That you guys
froze. You went off.
There you go.
Get to North Lake Christian and you froze.
Yeah.
I said Elijah Haven and everything froze, man. Yeah. Look, all these gray hairs right here. So if you guys don't know, I am defensive backs coach. So it's been an interesting week and fun times. But no, I think it's exciting because what I was saying was, I think you want to play the best. If you're a competitor, you want to go somewhere and play some really talented people. They're a very talented football team. To Jason's point, we do feel like we mirror St. Charles a bit in the approach of what we do. We're going to have to be really good defensively and do different things. But, in my mind, the best defense that North Lake Christian will have is Cam Casnave on offense, controlling the ball a little bit and running it and staying ahead of the chains and doing that stuff. But, North Lake Christian's got a lot of abilities to score in other ways. They've scored special teams touchdowns all year. They've returned 4 interceptions for touchdowns. They've got 12 interceptions as a team and three returned for touchdowns in a 10-game period because we only played 9 regular season games. They've got some talent. It'll be a fun matchup. I think it's going to be a great time in Dunham. It might rain. I haven't prayed for that, but I might start again. But yeah, we're excited, man. It's a fascinating matchup. I'll say this about Elijah Haven, and I've watched a lot of tape. I don't know if anybody's release is as quick as his. His ability to get to a spot and put his back foot down and the time it takes the ball to get out of his fingertips is insane. So all the short route concept stuff is phenomenal because it's so quick hitting. And I think what happens is when you play somebody like that, your angles and your game speed has to get adjusted pretty quickly, or it's going to take you a little while to get used to it because it does look different. Those not many kids from one hash can throw a 15-yard out to the other hash and not think about it, and he can.
You got to defend every blade of grass. Good luck.
Yes.
Go get it.
And he won't underthrow a ball. I'll say that.
Hold. That's just hold.
That's
hold.
it.
There we go. Down at the bottom of the bracket, another one that, speaking of talent on the field, Goodness gracious. A meet, the 10 seed, travels to Lafayette Renaissance Charter Academy. The 7 seed, they are 8-2. A meet is 8-3. A meet defeated Cohen last week, 59-20. We'll call them Larka. Larka had a bye last week. They're going to host a meet this year. This is in a meet team that early in the season took their lumps a little bit. I think that, first 2 weeks they play Franklinton and a good Hammond team and lose, and then they just started rolling until they meet Jules Sumner, who's another team that has a bye in the playoffs in week 10, and they lose 21-7. But you don't ever want to see a meet when the calendar turns to November. Like this is, they win. They win when later in the year they expect to win. Lafayette Renaissance, I think this is their second year in varsity football. They had an influx in talent from literally across the street from LCA, which was interesting. But
including a coach.
Yeah, that is correct. Well, yeah, everyone, not just the players, everyone. They walked across the street. Their season, they start off 5-0, then they play that LCA team, and LCA beats them 48-7. Win a few, and then they play Notre Dame, lose 38-19. Similar to what you talked about, Marshall, with Union. The better teams on their schedule kind of handled them, albeit twice. The teams they were supposed to kind of win and dominate, now that they win a close one over Ascension Episcopal, who I believe was undefeated when they played late. They've done that too. So this is probably about as even talent-wise as a matchup as they're going to see. LCA, I think, is in a different category. What Notre Dame does is different than anybody else. But when you just talk about pure football playing talent, this is about as even as it gets. I think this is going to be an extremely fun football game.
Yeah, and Keenan Brown, the quarterback for Lafayette Renaissance, he led the district in passing yards. Again, is a guy who's in the same district as Notre Dame and LCA. So for him to be the lead passer in that district speaks to him. Traven Wiltz for this team is a really solid playmaker, along with Ja'Cory Duhon. This Lafayette Renaissance team, again, maybe because of the other teams in their district, doesn't get the recognition that they do, yet they still end up with a 7 seed. So clearly the power ratings were in their favor for A-Meet. A-Meet has one of the biggest, nastiest offensive linemen in Jaden Haywood, 6'7", 380. He's a 3-star guy, and a guy who I've been kind of keeping my eye on, who he was injured a lot of last year. Lejaron Cyprian, 6'6", 200-pound receiver, really tall target. I don't know if Lafayette Renaissance has anybody that size that's going to really threaten him if they do try to toss the ball up to him. Franklin Morgan as well for this A-Meet team, Louisiana Tech commit. Really versatile player, can play both sides of the ball for this Warriors football team. I think this is kind of like what you said, Cass. I think it's one of the more evenly matched games, but you do have to look at who's hosting and who's taking that road trip. So how will you handle that trip? Will you be able to stay focused and maintain composure and make sure you're focused on football when you do have to buckle up, get on a bus, and take that trip?
Yeah, Coach Landry was high on Brown, their QB, at the beginning of this season. I think it is interesting to see when coaches call out like, "Hey, keep an eye on this guy," and it turns out that he had that kind of season. So, and Cass, you know a lot about that Lafayette region, but I think overall, like it would be great to see Larka, continue to kind of elevate, because that can only help LCA. They've done such a great job with their program the past few years, and when Coach Landry left, now they've got Coach Chop there, and he's done a great job this season. So just to have another member of that district that makes another quality week on that schedule is great for that district. And as far as A-Meet goes, we'll hear what Mike has to say, but there is to this day, I don't know if I've had a more favorite moment in college football in the past several years than seeing Devontae Smith and hearing A-Meet Louisiana at the Heisman ceremony. Like, not only is it A-Meet Louisiana, which my dad used to go there to unload rail cars. He worked in the ag business, so we used to drive to A-Meet for work, pulling a conveyor belt behind us. But got to see Devontae Smith, who lost in the state championship in the Superdome, is smaller than me, and I'm an accountant. And to hear A-Meet get shouted out in New York was unbelievable. And I still to this day, when I think about that, like I pump my fist.
Yeah. No, it was a neat moment for sure. I think for A-Meet, and I'm going to say it. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the kid, but they're going to be as good as quarterback Drew Palmer is. He's a senior. If you watch him play, he's extremely talented. He's got a ton of arm talent. He's a really good athlete. He's come on the last 3 or 4 weeks and had some really, really good games. And if they can throw the ball and he can be efficient and not turn it over, they've got a big line. They're going to run him back a sophomore, Jamiron Dillon, who ran for over 1,000 yards this season. He's a smaller thumper guy who's really quick. I think they're really talented. Jason, I know you touched on Franklin Morgan Jr. Louisiana Tech got gold in that kid. He reminds me a lot of Amik Robertson when he came from Thibodeau and kind of, what's going to happen and where's the kid going to go, and went up there and had a phenomenal career. In fact, when everybody went after him, he said, "Nah, y'all slept on me. I'm gonna stay up here and do my thing," and it worked out
on
well.
Monday Night Football last night.
That's right. That's right. But Franklin Morgan Jr. is one to watch. He's a supreme athlete. Comes from great family of athletes. They've done it for a long time. But once again, it's not in A-Meet cities, but every light might be off in A-Meet on Friday night. They might all head out to Lafayette. It'll be a great party, that's for sure.
No doubt. That's a town that's, I guess, I don't know if it's the colors, but it kind of reminds me of Letcher. Like the town is all in on. I mean, if you're not
like Bunkie
for A-Meet, or if you're not about A-Meet, then you're gonna have some problems going through A-Meet. It's a heck of a place to watch a football game too. Awesome town. Kind of Louisiana high school football personified, I would say, down there. All right. Also in this Division III select bracket, man, it's the defending state champs, Catholic New Iberia. They're the 9 seed. They will travel to Bunkie, the 8 seed. Bunkie is 9-1. Catholic New Iberia comes in at 9-2. Last week, Catholic New Iberia shut out Glen Oaks 52-0. Bunkie gets the bye. I think also the way that it worked out with these two teams at 8 and 9, huge for Bunkie to get the 8 seed, not just because of the bye, because now they get to host Catholic New Iberia as opposed to traveling down to New Iberia. So that could be proved pretty large here this week. Bunkie comes in led by Zion Lee, guy going to Navy. He's done it for him all year. He's close to, if he hasn't already, close to breaking 1,000 yards, right, Marshall? If he hadn't got there yet, is that about right?
Yeah.
He's also only has 20 touchdowns. I say only sarcastically. He's got 20 touchdowns. He also had a 6 touchdown game. Catholic New Iberia, they've handled their schedule well, obviously, to come in with the record that they have. I think the best thing on Catholic New Iberia's schedule is a loss, and it was a 1-point loss to Notre Dame. And this is a very, very good Notre Dame football team. Catholic New Iberia goes toe-to-toe with them. The little bit that I saw Bunkie was probably on their worst night, which was against Gina. And it was at a time I didn't watch into the second half. Gina kind of pulled away early on. The game ended up 68-45. But this is a fun matchup, which you would expect from an 8 and 9 matchup with the defending state champs, who I don't know how many people saw them win in state last year. They kind of make a surprise run to the Dome, a little bit. Can they go do it again? And they got to go through a really good Bunkie team to do it.
And when you look at this Catholic New Iberia team, what I've said is I love their secondary. I think their secondary is one of the top to bottom most difficult secondaries to go play football against. First of all, you're led by Karen Eugene, who, again, double-digit interception guy, is a sophomore. Just really, he can lock down half of the field. I mean, alone, right? And that's not to mention Leighton Mitchell, who's another guy who's a senior on this team. Again, they do like to kind of play both ways. Mitchell is one of those guys. Xavier Leday, who, again, was stepping up in early parts of the season, making some big plays. They also, offensively, Owen Morris has been a really big back for them, along with the 6'8" wide receiver, Jacob Minaville. Like, they've got some weapons, but the one thing I will say is Bunkie can be physical. Like, they've got 3 receivers as well, Ron Patterson, Kane McGillen, and Amir Perry, who are all kind of dynamic playmakers. And, of course, Zion Lee, who I've said it and I'll continue to say it, really good running back, but really could be one of the best linebackers in the state. Just incredible instincts. On the snap, knows where to go, hits the hole. I mean, really a fun football player to watch. But if you are Catholic New Iberia, I watched There was no score. There was no sound. So bear with me on my limited knowledge. But I watched the game in full against Lowerville. And Lowerville out-physicaled them. They were very physical. They ran the football right at them. And it seemed like Catholic New Iberia had no way to stop it. So my question is, if Bunkie comes into this game, try to play the physical football game, will Catholic New Iberia be able to respond?
Yeah, I think I think Bunkie's definitely going to bring that physicality. I love their head coach Jimmy Hillman. He played at Iota, played for LCU, and was actually the coach at Marksville prior to coming over to Bunkie. And that game, week 10, they played the 74th Catskin game between Bunkie and Marksville in week 10. Bunkie wins that game. Bunkie gets the 8 seed and a first round bye. Marksville gets the 9 seed and non-select. They won their first round game, but now Marksville's on the road on the non-select side. So that was, you're right, Cass, that was a big win for Bunkie to get that 8 seed with a rivalry game in week 10. Yeah. But Coach Hillman has installed a culture there in 3 years that I think is there to stay. They're extremely physical. You mentioned Kane Milligan. He's a receiver, kind of like Julian Edelman, in that he's going to be very pesky, but he'll also put a forearm under your helmet, and remind you what you're up for. Patterson is a dynamic receiver. He's also their ball hawk, and can guard the wide receiver one on the other side. Their defense is really stacked. Lucas Mose is a senior who's extremely experienced. Luke Norman set the school record for tackles. And at a certain point this year, Tripp Larwood, who's an underclassman, was leading the team in tackles. So they're very deep on defense. They're very talented on defense, and they're very fast on defense. I love Zion Lee. If you talk to him, if you just hear him speak, you're thinking that Navy's the one that's lucky to get him instead of the other way around. And it's similar to A-Meet. You go down Main Street in Bunkie, it's either red or white. And that's a lot of that is Coach Hillman and what he's built, because there was a lot of talent that graduated last year when they lost in the semifinals, I think. This is a public school that plays in Select D3. They're a magnet school, so they're in Select, but there's, probably not that many people in Bunkie that aren't right down the road from the high school, that play football for them. So they're a true 3A public school, making it happen in this bracket. And I'm really can't wait to see if they can continue their run, because they're stacked, and they just completely reloaded from last year. They're actually on their Fitzgerald is their starting quarterback now. Brady Wright started the season as quarterback, but they were kind of getting Fitzgerald ready. And so now he's ready. He stepped in, and it allows Brady Wright to focus on defense, which is super important for Bunkie. So I really can't wait to see what kind of run the Panthers can go on, because I've just watched that program be built brick by brick, and they deserve to make a run here. I hope they can.
Yeah, I think it's another one of those fantastic matchups. I'm really intrigued by, I know Catholic New Iberia well. It feels like you always see them in round 3 or round 4, in the Superdome. But the thing that's impressed me about them, Jason touched on this, they gave 40 points to Laurelville. In the last 6 games, they have not given up more than 8 points except for within that loss. And they come back from that loss and have like 2 shutouts. So, their ability to play defense. The thing that always impresses me about Catholic New Iberia is they look like a 5A school on the other sideline. There's 115 kids. It's wild. They've got a lot of kids in that program. They run it really well. And I think, honestly, I don't know if this isn't one of the more talented teams they have. Maybe not the best team they've had, really good teams, but pure talent and athleticism. They've got some kids that are different than have been at Catholic New Iberia in the past.
Yeah, that secondary, like Jason, like you said, you got to see them up close and personal last year. Really good. And you mentioned it, Marshall. Last year, Bunkie did make it to the semifinals. They defeated A-Meet in round 1, or their round 2, which was their first game, and then bowed out to Dunham in the semifinals, 46 to 22. So see if they can't do that again and get that started Friday night. Guys, this was a whole heck of a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I had a blast. We could do this for 3 more hours. I may wake up single but so we don't want that. But this was awesome. Yeah, I mean the knowledge that y'all bring. It's fun just to talk ball with y'all. Really, really cool stuff. And then what y'all are doing, Mike, you over at Northshore Prep Report, and then Marshall with the Red River Roundup. It really good for high school football in Louisiana. It's really, really good. So we need more like it. So if you're looking for your fix on high school football, you come right here to Talking Ball Sundays and Tuesdays. You follow Mike at North Shore Prep Report, and you can follow Marshall at Red River Roundup. We appreciate it, fellas.
Yeah, appreciate it. Look, one more thing. Homer Haynesville in the second round. Homer won their first round game, so they'll go to Haynesville. They've played 117 consecutive years in the regular season. This will be, give or take, what archives from 1919 you pull up. This will be their 130th game against each other. They're 11 miles apart. I used to be the radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Tornado, and Coach Red Franklin, who coached for over 30 years and won 11 state titles, passed away in March of this year. His son, David, is the head coach now, and has won, I think 2014 was their last one, but I think they've got 17 state titles. So Coach Franklin's son, the other Coach Franklin, is the head coach now. I got to meet Coach Red. He had his seat on the 50-yard line, and when he was no longer able to come to the games, he would listen to us on the radio, and I know he's watching from on high. I would love to see the Tours make a run for Coach Red and give him one more title because he built that program.
That's
awesome. One of the best in the state. Like when you think of, maybe I guess you put it to small school high school football at Haynesville, and that's it. Like they make the 5-hour trip from South Arkansas to the Superdome seemingly every year.
And look, so they kick off their games at 7:30. That's their tradition at Haynesville. They kick off at 7:30 because Coach Red wanted to give all his blue-collar parents a time to get off work and get the dungarees off and make it to the stadium. So that's their tradition. I mean, that's awesome. Perfect. It's perfect.
Good stuff. That's the good stuff.
That's super cool. Cass, I'll just say thanks for having me. One thing that I appreciate about all you guys, and I think makes a difference in the space that we're in, is there's so many relationships, and you can tell just everybody talking, that this isn't stuff that people read, but they generally have good relationships with not only schools, but administrators, coaches, and players. But that goes a long way. I'm enamored with high school sports, and my phone's blowing up. I've got basketball and soccer stuff to post here. So, the night is early.
I think my Hawks played Brother Martin tonight.
Yes, sir.
I have not seen the score, so
I haven't opened it yet.
Yeah, okay.
It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah,
but I just wanted to say, I didn't want to. I can't help myself, guys. Last minute additions, but
just
guys, Division I non-select, man. There's not a boring game in this bracket. Even Westgate, Ruston. I mean, Westgate, so much talent on the field, taking on that Ruston team, but Terrebonne going against Southside. Two similar styles, even though they're just different offenses, but getting to see Quincy Adams take on a Southside team that really is just such a physical team. And you got the Baton Rouge games, right? East Ascension trying to redeem a loss from earlier in the season against Central on the road. That should be really fun. Denham Springs taking on Zachary in a game where, again, if you're kind of name, like gazing at names and not really like substance, you think like, man, Zachary, but really Denham Springs has been such a fun team to watch this year, and actually took it to Zachary earlier, so that'll be fun. I just think there's so much fun football to be played in this round, and again, St. Paul's Evangel. St. Paul's taking that road trip up there. I think that'll be a fun one to watch. I don't know that Evangel's only played maybe one defense of St. Paul's caliber, so that'll be interesting to see. I can go on and on, but again, just appreciate you guys coming on with us. Again, so much respect for both of you guys and what you guys do and bring to the space as well. And again, it seems like we're all kind of doing it and going through the trenches at the same time. So getting to build the relationships with you guys and meet you guys. And again, I'm going to have to grab Mike, I don't have your number. I have to grab your number after this. But again, being in this space and getting to, getting to look at all of this together. And somebody, I do want to point out, look, somebody mentioned, I do want to talk about real quick. Let's go ahead and bring that up. Look, Garen Lewis said, DLS versus Notre Dame. Absolutely. We talked about the physicality of this Notre Dame team, this De La Salle team earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
De La Salle is a team that, look, really, when you look at talk about lower seeds, physical football, that's a very evenly matched game in terms of physicality. This De La Salle team, again, they've had to earn their stripes along the way, and they're going to go take that road trip to Crowley. That'll be another really interesting one that's being played.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my not sleepers, but one of my lookout teams is Southside, the 8th seed in Division I non-select, and I think it's been a minute, but I think Notre Dame beat them early on in the year late.
Week 1.
So I mean, yeah, the Pio is hiding out in that 2 seed in Division III select. Man, between Calvary, Dunham, LCA, I mean, God, Division III select as always, it's super competitive.
And when you got a team like De La Salle sitting at where they are, just proves to the depth and level of that division. Like there's so many teams.
Yeah, Mike, you were on them early, as far as kind of being a sleeper, and here they are.
Well, look, De La Salle's losses early in the season are Central, Holy Cross, St. Paul, St. Charles Catholic, and Shaw. They were 0-5. So they ran the gauntlet, got into district play, did their thing, and now they're off and running. And we talk about all the time, those teams that are tested and have played it before, Notre Dame's not going to be a surprise for them. They've played teams with just as much, if not better, talent. So they're ready to go.
Get on the dance floor and start a mosh pit.
And wait, look, I want to
St. Charles Avenue.
Wait, look, I want to give my guy Garen some props too. Came out second in the 110-meter hurdles as well. So really quick.
Oh, that's good, Garen. That's awesome.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for tonight. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah.
That was I mean, the matchups are only going to get better. My personal, other than this week, I say that every week, but my personal favorite week of football is Thanksgiving week. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I guess I was lucky enough to practice on Thanksgiving a couple of times, and it's one of the best weeks of the year. I think it really is. So we look forward to that. But before we get there, you got to win this week. So round 2 is huge. We get the top seeds coming back into the party. They joined the party, and the playoffs are just kicking off. And man, what a great time to be a Louisiana high school football fan. Thank y'all. Go ahead.
You guys don't get too much rest. We got 8 games to cover tomorrow for Northshore Prep Report. So if you see the same 4 faces, let's do it.
We're in. That's it. We're in. We got it. You can find us there again. No
That's
doubt.
it.
And on Saturday morning, we got Marshall and his Red River Roundup on
early
Sports at 8 a.m. So fun weekend ahead. This is, again, such an exciting time. It's so cool to follow these teams and follow the storylines and see these guys go get after it on their road to the Superdome. So round 2, Friday night begins Friday night. You can catch Jason, myself, Lance will hopefully get over his sickness. He'll be back on Sunday where we will recap week 2 of the playoffs on Sunday at 8:05. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Go have a great weekend. Enjoy some Louisiana high school football. For Marshall, Mike, and Jason, I am Cass. We appreciate you all watching. See you on Sunday.